Right. Good evening, everyone. We're going to get started. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm Kim Chu. I'm the Assistant Soup of Curriculum Instruction for Princeton Public Schools, and I'm thrilled to introduce our team here tonight to talk to with you about K-5 report cards and the changes that we're making in an effort to be more transparent about the work that our elementary program is doing, and also just to talk about the great work our students do each and every day with the teachers that we so entrust in their care. So I'm going to introduce Sarah Moore, our Supervisor of Elementary Education, and then she's going to introduce the other lovely folks on this call. So Sarah, take it away.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tu. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. I'm so excited to celebrate the wonderful work that's been happening around updating these report cards. We have a fantastic team of educators here to speak with us tonight as well. We have our three instructional coaches who we do so very much with and who work every day to support our staff and our students. We have Lauren Samara. Lauren, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Happy to be here with you. I'm Lauren Samara, and I'm part of the K-5 instructional coach team. I work with students and staff more on the intervention side of instructional coaching.
Thank you, Lauren. We also have Mary Ellen Wallauer. Mary Ellen, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Sarah. Hi, my name is Mary Ellen Wallauer. I'm happy to be here tonight. I'm also part of the K-5 instructional coaching team. My focus this year is primarily on language arts, so I'm happy to be here to chat a bit about our exciting new updated report cards.
Thank you, Mary Ellen. And we also have Daniel Hardiker. Daniel, do you want to take a minute to introduce yourself?
Hi, it's so nice to be here and excited to be a part of this team. I am the math side to Mary Ellen's language arts, so my primary focus is on math instruction K-5.
Great.
Thank you so much for joining tonight.
Yes. And so many times parents often ask, what is an instructional coach and sort of what kind of does their role look like? And so often what research says is that the best kind of professional development for an educator is have ongoing job embedded professional development and really have multiple touch points across a school year instead of sort of a one and done, oh, we're going to learn about X and then it's in September and then you never hear it about again and you're kind of left to your own devices. This team here works to create pacing calendars. They work to provide resources for teachers to come in and do side-by-side teaching, coaching, pull small groups. So they really do like walk the walk. They're in the classrooms with the staff each and every day. And as we're launching new initiatives like our structured literacy initiative, which we'll talk about a little bit in kindergarten and first grade, and math workshop in grades 2 through 5, and our supports with what we call the MTSS, the multi-tiered systems of supports with Lauren, all of these sort of initiatives can't get off the ground without the folks on this phone call. So we're so appreciative of the work that they do every day. So a couple of logistics about tonight. I'm going to share my screen in a second. We're going to go through a slide deck, talk about these report cards. If you have questions, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen here. You can kind of put them in along the way, and at the end, we'll sort of do like themes and answer some questions. If something's like a quick question, we'll answer it in the chat right away. And then if we think it will be helpful for someone else to hear that answer as well, we'll share it at the end. We hope to be done by 7:30 because we know you're parents with young children, and I'm sure it's bath time, bedtime, all of the times, as well as if you're a Phillies fan, I think there's other things going on right now. So we really appreciate your captive attention and support. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. And this will be on the district website posted tomorrow, the recording and our slide deck. So if you have further questions and want to kind of dive deeper, access the report card templates, or just know of a neighbor or a friend who couldn't come tonight, these will be on the website tomorrow. Okay. So what is standards-based report card? So as you can imagine, in New Jersey, we have a lot of different standards. We have English standards, math standards, science, social studies, all of the special areas. And what the state does is they say, by the end of first grade, this is what a child is supposed to do. By the end of second grade, this is what a child was supposed to do. Now, a lot of you, like me, maybe back in the day, we got O's, S's, and N's, maybe outstanding, satisfactory, need of improvement, right? And it was probably a little vague, and your parents might have been okay with it, may have not have been okay with it, but they didn't necessarily know, well, how well were you achieving the academic content standards and the skills that go with them? So what a standards-based report card does is it really gets into the nitty-gritty details of what a child is supposed to do. For example, in kindergarten, knowing how to count fluently between 1 and 20. Right? By the end of kindergarten, that's what all students should be able to do. And if not, then they need some supports then to help them be successful. So what our report cards do, and they have done, this is not a change in Princeton, is really kind of nail down those standards and say, this is how your child is performing against that end of the year standard. And it really helps provide this clear picture of performance targets and what the next step in the sequence might be.
All right. I'm going to talk a little bit about our process in this. So over the summer, we met as a team to come together to discuss where our current report cards were and where we wanted to see them go. So that committee met over 3 days, and our sole purpose was really to sit and revise the K-5 report cards, to look at standards and to look at the developmentally appropriate points for students. This group included stakeholders from every grade level. We had general education, special education teachers, our instructional coaches who you see here on this call. We had specialists. So specialists are individuals who teach things like music or art or gym. And then we had representation from all 4 buildings, and both traditional teachers on the English side of the house from CP, as well as the dual language immersion program.
So scoring. So what does this look like on the report card? And we're going to show you actual report cards as well, and they will be posted on the website tomorrow. So when you're looking at your child's report card, which you will not get until December, obviously next week's conferences, this is sort of your first touch point with the school for the school year is next week. There's going to be 3 levels, 3, 2, and 1. So 3 means your child is meeting the learning standards consistently. That is a really good point, because this is the end of the year standard. So maybe in December, they're not consistently meeting the end of the year standard without teacher support. So for the majority of students, they're going to be a 2 most of the year, because they are demonstrating progress toward an understanding and a mastery of that end of the year target standard. If a child is receiving or earning a 3 in the first trimester or in the second trimester, that means that through a variety of assessments and anecdotal evidence from the classroom experience, we are seeing that they are consistently outperforming that end of the year standard before the end of the year. So most students should be getting a 3 or earning getting a 2 or earning a 2 throughout the school year. If a student's meeting a 1, that means that they're not meeting the standards yet. That doesn't mean that they're never going to meet the standards, but they're showing that there's limited progress towards an understanding of the knowledge. And that's sort of a flag for us to say, okay, this child might need additional supports with small group instruction, with our AIS program, which is that when they're being pulled out for additional literacy or mathematics support. Maybe they need English language support. Maybe they need an INRS plan, which is an intervention and referral services plan, to get them back on track where they need to be. But these are all sort of just a barometer of where the child is from across the school year and how they are meeting those end of year standards.
So before I go into what's been updated, I saw a great question in the chat, which is, why are we updating? So I think it makes sense to touch on that before I go into what's been updated. So why are we updating? Coming out of a post-pandemic stage in education, some of the standards on the report card and some of the indicators tied back to pandemic learning. There were indicators about Zoom readiness and computer readiness in online classrooms, which is not something that we're seeing in our current educational landscape. So some of those items needed to be taken out. Things like our specials, STEAM was not included, which is our science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics course for students. They work with a STEAM educator once a week. Standards weren't included for that special. They were included for things like art and music, but not for STEAM. We wanted to help with the user language. If I were a parent reading the previous report card, some of it was a little clunky in academic language and terms. We wanted to make it so that it was very comprehensive. If you are a parent going to sit down and look at that report card, you understand exactly what the teacher is translating to you about your child's learning progress. So what's been updated? In the vein of really wanting to hold parents as equal stakeholders in education, we want to go ahead and put the child's reading level right at the top of the report card for you. So we use a DRA-3. A DRA-3 is a reading assessment for students. On the report card, you'll see what your child's current DRA score is and what you can expect by the end of the year, what is typical in that grade band. So that is something new that as parents, you can now partner with us and say, okay, I am aware of where my child is reading at. When I go to Barnes & Noble, or when I go to the library, or when I go to the bookshop, I can now understand what reading level I can select books at for them. I can see that if they're pretty far out of that end of the year benchmark, then you're able to have more conversations with us as educators about steps we're taking to make sure that child is moving along and being supported to the end of the year goal. And if your child is way over that end of year goal, how are we working deeper to accelerate and really enhance their learning? So we have the reading levels now available. We really did go back with a lens and look at reader-friendly language. As educators, we want to be very clear about what we're describing in children and what we're seeing. We will have a whole working document with some rubrics and student strategy examples for you. So as parents, you can see exactly what our teachers are looking at when they think of those scores that Dr. Tu mentioned. Again, you should expect to see mostly 2s on that report card, right? If a student is way beyond, then you might see 1 or 2 3s, or if they really need some support, you might see a few 1s, but we're really looking for that 2 that they are working towards meeting that end of the year standard. We now have a portrait of a graduate in Princeton, and those skills are now embedded in our report card. As I mentioned, STEAM standards are now included. And the DLI report card, there was some really beautiful work done around the DLI report card to go deeper into those actual standards. So this is really best practice, and so that we can partner with you as parents from the school lens.
And I'm just going to weigh in. ACFL stands for the American Council for Teaching of Foreign Language. So these are the Spanish acquisition targets, so that parents with students in that program can kind of see how their learner is progressing in the target language acquisition, reading, writing, speaking, listening throughout the K-5 experience.
So when you actually do get to see the report cards, you'll start to see some parallels in each area and domain across grade levels. And it's done very intentionally because each skill that's mentioned in a standard is part of a larger continuum that follows very clearly from kindergarten all the way through 5th grade. So for example, if a 2nd grader is expected to add and subtract within 20, that progresses into 3rd grade where they are expected to multiply and divide within 100, and that skill continues on. And all of these, this is a math example, and all of these are designed to prepare students for algebra readiness once they get to middle school. Progressions and continuums like this exist across all subject areas and all domains. This is just one example of how each skill very clearly progresses from grade to grade.
Thank you, Dan. All right, so if you bear with me for 1 second, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to share another screen with the examples of the report cards. So when you click on the links tomorrow, you will see a Google Drive folder of copies of the report cards, okay? So Sarah is going to take us through the 1st grade report card. Can everyone see my screen on the panelist side? Yep, okay, great. I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger. Go ahead, Sarah.
So there are the performance indicators that Dr. Tu mentioned. Again, 3, meeting the end of the year standard. 2 is progressing, which is where we want most students to live. And that 1 is if they're progressing inconsistently. There is another note on here that if something is grayed out, it's not assessed at that time. So you'll see this a lot for language arts, just because we're piloting 2 math curriculums this year, the updated Ready Math and Reveal. So by the end of the year, we learn everything at the same time, but some of the sequencing might have something a little before the other. So graying out in math will happen next year. But this year, while the pilots are happening, you'll see the gray outs in ELA. If a box is grayed out, that means that it's just not covered in that reporting period, but it is covered later in the year or at a different time in the year. So the first thing we see here, you can see that DRA band at the end. So by June, for our 1st grade students, we are hoping that they are a 16 to an 18 in that band. And then you'll get your child's reading level for December, March, and June. So remember, this is a band. This is where we're hoping that students are by the end of the year. This first section, we see foundational and language skills. So a lot of this relates to how children learn to read. This year, we're using the IMSI or Gillingham methodology in KN1, which really supports early literacy acquisition skills. We now know that there are new state standards coming in for language arts and math, and almost all of the new standards align to the foundational work we are doing around the science of reading and embedding best reading practice. So in this foundational piece, you'll see things like, do students understand the concept of print? Do they know to start on the left side of the page and go to the right? Can they recognize features in a sentence like a capital letter and punctuation? There is a hyperlink that'll be in our shared folder for grade level phonics. It'll take you through our scope and sequences. So essentially where your child is going to start in the year and what they'll learn by the end of the year. We have literature as our next section. We have informational text. So those are the first grayed out boxes you see. That just tells you that for our first few units, they're not focusing so much on the informational piece. but they will later in the year. Writing, you'll see the same thing, those gray out boxes on when they're reported. So narrative is the beginning, opinion writing is at the end of the year, and informational writing and explanatory text are in the middle of the year. So as we go through with math, again, no grayed out boxes for math this year. They will be next year. We start with operations and algebraic thinking, numbers and operations in base 10, measurement and data. We have some here. K1, you may see some gray boxes in the higher grade levels. You won't see those gray boxes for math. We have geometry, mathematical practices, so how a student is thinking about their math. In science, we have very inquiry-based measures here with prompting and support, combines observations and scientific information to ask questions and carry out investigations, so really deep thinking skills. For social studies, they're a little bit more specific around the units that we cover that relate to standards. So we have economics, civics, geography, and history. You'll see these 4 themes across the kindergarten through 5th grade, but it does change in the complexity and topics covered within, but you'll see those 4 main themes throughout. Our portrait of a graduate skill, you'll see that they're scored a little bit differently. They are not 1, 2, 3, just because there's no hard and fast assessment that we could link with these, right? They're more interpretive of how a student is doing. So we'll see consistently sometimes and not yet. So something like your child respects the ideas and rights and feelings of others. There's no test for that, right? That's teacher observation. So that's why we switch to something like the consistently sometimes and not yet. So these are really learning ready. Are they curious learners? Are they collaborative? And then health and wellness advocate. You'll see those special areas, so things like art and music. There's not a ton of revisions there. In the previous report card, they're very similar. The only addition in the specialist area is that STEAM is now included. Mm-hmm. And then you'll have your attendance at the end, as well as your teacher comment section. So that's the framework. I spent a little bit more time going through it in the 1st grade lens. The other grades look very, very similar. The only thing that changes is the complexity of what's happening, and the standards are aligned to the grade level. So again, we have that DRA. By the end of 3rd grade, we hope that your child is at a 38. And we can monitor them along. That doesn't mean they're going to start the year at the 38. That's okay. That's the end of the year goal. So again, we see the foundational skills that start off. We go then into deeper skills like informational. We look at writing. Again, some units like the narrative are covered first, informational at the middle here, opinion at the end. So the sequence is a little different. But you see common strands. In math, we have things like operations and algebraic thinking. We have numbers and operation base 10, numbers and operations for fractions, measurement and data, and geometry. Then we have those same special areas, science, social studies. And then we have our portrait of a graduate skill. Those will remain the same, very similar throughout.
Your specials. So yeah, you can see just sort of how Dan had that progression chart with that green arrow. You can see from 1st to 3rd grade how they're similar categories, but that the concepts go deeper. They build upon the previous year. I mean, we're skipping years. We went from 1st to 3rd grade, and I'll quickly show 5th as well. And you can see 3rd grade at the end of the year expectation was a 38. Now we have a 50. But once again, foundational language skills, literature, informational, they are all very similar, but the skills build on. Now, the State Board of Education, as Sarah briefly spoke about, just approved new English language arts and math standards. And at first we were being told that we would have 2 years to implement the new standards, but it looks like they're on the books for next September. So they'll just be, these are living documents. So as standards are updated, we revise. And I think we really are ahead of the curve on some of the programming that we're doing that is already capturing these skills, but we will always align to whatever changes the state makes in standards. They will be reflected in the report cards as well. And I don't know if the coaches had anything else that they wanted to share about the report card template.
Just to reiterate that any of the hyperlinks that you note there will be live. So they'll go directly to a very family-friendly, student-friendly rubric, or I think they're mostly rubrics or the progressions, so that if there's something on, yep, there you go. So if there's something on the report card that is a little detailed, you'll have access to really what the students have access to in class, so that they can really foster independence and agency, checking their work and seeing, are they doing these things more independently. So that should be, that's one of the new additions that I think families will like to see.
Yes. I think it's helpful to kind of know what the expectations of these tasks are, so that you have the expectation of then what does it look like when you're just seeing a little clause and saying, well, I guess I think I know what a fifth grader would do with that information, but kind of seeing the rubric and seeing the checklist is obviously very helpful. So I'm going to share my screen again back to, oh, I'm so sorry. I forgot that we were supposed to share our DLI changes as well. So just give me 1 second. Okay, and we're going to make this screen smaller, and we're going to go right here. Okay, so DLI is our dual language immersion program, for those of you who don't know. And as I said, we're going to do Spanish language acquisition. So these are also scored as consistently, sometimes, and not yet. So if new parents to the DLI program, you will have a traditional report card that reports out math, understanding, science, social studies, English language arts, but you will also have a section here that says Spanish language arts and proficiency, and you'll have either consistently, sometimes, or not yet in the domains of speaking, listening, reading, writing, and concepts of print in Spanish language arts. So these were the kindergarten skills. And of course, this would be separated out onto a traditional report card. So for kindergarten, you would only get the kindergarten box, but for clarity purposes, we put everything in one document here so that you can see the building of skills. And you see that, from kindergarten to first grade, they're using simple sentences with basic information. They have very much be able to listen and have that receptive language with familiar topics with high contextual support. And a lot of our kids are already past these points, but these are the recommendations of the ACTFL standards from across the nation in language acquisition. Okay. All right, now I will go back to the slide deck. Sorry if I'm making people a little seasick here.
Okay, so what are our touch points to help educators inform for grading on their report card? So there's a few assessment points that we look at, but they're not limited to only these, but these are the assessment data points we use. We do use iReady. That assessment is adaptive, and it helps teachers look at student skills and where they're currently placing throughout grade levels. iReady we have for math, and we are piloting it for ELA this year. So we do have all of our math iReady consistently, and the ELA is in pilot. We look at math unit assessments. We look at Linkit assessments. So Linkit is a little bit different than the iReady math assessments. While iReady math is adaptive, it means it'll go up if your child is in second grade, but placing at the third grade level, or if your child is in second grade and placing in the first grade level for some skills. That's adaptive. The Linkit assessment measures end of the year math benchmarks. So when we look at standards, how is your child progressing towards mastery of the end of year standard? So that one is not adaptive. It is looking at end of the year standard mastery. We look at those DRAs, which is the leveling for reading. I will say with a grain of salt, for our very young readers in kindergarten, the DRA relies heavily on sight word acquisition. We really do recommend reading things like decodable readers with those young students. So things like Bob's books. If you need recommendations for decodable readers, please email me. I can put my email in the chat after. But once your student is at the mid first grade level and beyond, you can use that leveler to really help find books in stores. I can share a resource at the end. I saw someone asked in chat. There's something called Scholastic Wizard through the Scholastic Book website that you can use to help you find levels for items. But really, we would recommend that really mid first grade and beyond. For kindergartners, we really want them to have lots of access to decodable text to build up their fluency and stamina. We look at the IMSI initial assessments. So there are OG assessments for K and 1. We look at weekly phonics assessments for kindergarten through second grade. We look at on-demand writing benchmarks and how your child is doing in terms of their writing acquisition and skills. We're looking at notes from conferring and when they're meeting with teachers. And we're looking at project and unit assessments for all content areas. So those are some touch points, but again, not limited to only these. We look at things like teacher observation and how their behavior is in class and what they're performing like. So again, touch points, but not limited to.
Mm-hmm.
So this is my section. I'm excited to report out on our new Portrait of a Graduate skills included within our report card. So these skills provide a whole child view to express what our PPS high school graduates need to know and embody in order to thrive, not just in school, but in our greater community and beyond. As you can see from the graphic here, they include health and wellness advocacy, critical thinking, collaboration and communication, skills of a global citizen, creativity and innovation, and curiosity. But I'm sure we all know that these skills don't just miraculously appear once students reach high school. So we begin laying the foundation way back in the early years, kind of similar to how Dan was talking about viewing the academic skills on a developmental progression. We also view our portrait of a graduate skills through the same type of lens. So we're really looking on a continuum from preschool all the way through high school graduation, and how these skills grow and develop along with your child as they move throughout their educational journey. So you'll notice on the report card that there's a specific section for these skills, and they are scored, as Sarah mentioned, in a different way. So consistently, sometimes, and not yet, since there's not really a standard formal measure for looking at skills such as these. But what's important to keep in mind is that the skills really reflect developmental expectations, and remembering that they build on one another year to year as your child grows.
And one of the things that we're doing as in a district level committee, we have a group of staff from across the district. We met yesterday to really dive into those continuums, because a lot of times people say, well, it's not just the teachers of seniors who need to worry about this portrait of a graduate, right? Like when they graduate, they're going to have these 6 skills and embody them, but it's K through 12 or even pre-K to 12. We have over 130 pre-Kers in our district. So what does it start? And what does it mean to be a curious learner in pre-K versus 2nd grade versus 5th grade versus 8th grade, et cetera? And so how do we build those things along the way? Because as we all know out in the real world, these are the skills that help you be successful. Obviously, you need content knowledge as well, but the content knowledge is the vehicle to get to these skills, because we have to learn how to collaborate and work in teams. We have to learn to understand diverse perspectives, to have critical thinking, right? All of these wonderful, valuable skills. How are we intentionally teaching them? How are we giving kids feedback about them? And how do we kind of move them along this continuum to graduation? So we're really excited about this work. As it says here, to be shared at a later date. We're thinking about working with the PTOC and doing something in January or something like that once all the progressions are done and we roll out to staff to show the exciting work that's happening behind the scenes and how this aligns to our strategic plan.
Okay. So we have a few family resources that hopefully will be helpful as we start to explore the new report card and really take a look at it when your child brings home their first report card. Number one is just the rubric and learning pathway examples. Those are the hyperlink resources that are already embedded in all the K-5 report cards. The learning pathways are really overviews of those progressions, and the rubrics, some of them are aligned to our writing units, and then some are kind of a configuration of our phonics skills, so progressions in early literacy skills. And those are a little new this year, so it's nice to see and have reference to them when you're meeting with your child's teacher for conferences and things like that. There are some resources that are embedded within our curriculum that will really be supportive at home. So you may see your child bringing home their laptop or their Chromebook and going on something called Lexia Core 5. It's an online resource that they also can use in school for additional, just a supportive and supplemental resource for ELA. So linking to phonics skills, comprehension, vocabulary, fluency. It's also adaptive, so it really meets your child where they are specifically and targets skills that they are going to continue to bolster as the year goes on. Students in grades K through 5 have access to Lexia, so you'll be seeing some of them bringing home their Chromebooks and maybe practicing for about 10-15 minutes per night, if that. Our online math program has a component called My Path. It's part of the iReady platform, and it's similar to Lexia in that they really are on their own path for learning. They also can do it in school as a supplemental time for, technology time, maybe in math workshop, and they continue on and it advances in complexity as they go along. So again, we don't want them on that, for an hour a night, but if they are on there for 10-15 minutes a night as a supplemental resource to homework, it's a nice resource to have for families. And then our DLI program has access to an online library called Raz Kids, and there are so many books in Spanish for families to read together at home, print out. Students will have access to that in school and at home, but it really has thousands of titles that students and families can read together. And it's just a nice resource to supplement the books in Spanish. So those are just a few of our family resources that are tied to our curriculum.
Okay. I would be remiss if I didn't share some important dates that are tied to these report cards and conferences. So as I'm sure you're all very much aware, conferences are next week. We look forward to seeing you in our buildings and with our staff meeting with you all next week. Then the December 15th is our first trimester report card will be made available online. And the reporting period, just so you know, it's not that like teachers put in the scores that day and then like poof, it's magic. There's like a 2-week sort of reporting period before then. So sometimes they're looking back at, they're going back over the past 60 days and kind of amalgamating everything coming together. So you might say, oh, my child just aced a math test on the 14th. Like, was that in consideration? Sometimes yes, and sometimes no, because of the reporting period. I just want to make sure that that's clear here. Then we have our spring conferences. Right after that, we have our second trimester report card. And then finally, on June 16th is our third trimester report card. I am going to stop sharing before we get to questions, because I do think it's helpful to go to that link that Mary Ellen was mentioning about the rubric and learning pathway example. So I'm going to share my screen for a second again. So when you click that document link in the slide deck, you can see our scope and sequence for kindergarten, and you can see what letters are being taught. You can see our scope and sequence for first grade about our spelling rules, encoding, decoding. And then finally, you can see our foundation sequence. So this is really our K2 phonics and word analysis skills, like our program of attack. We have reading skills, comprehension, progression. So what does this look like for narrative reading and for informational reading? So we can kind of overwhelm you with all kinds of information. This team thought it'd be helpful to kind of have it all in one place so that you could see examples. And then this would begin to kind of sent out with the report cards as well. And then you can see the rubrics, how the teachers are giving the feedback, and then going back to that K-5 when we showed on the website, the math progression as well. Okay, so these are just, once again, helpful resources that can kind of inform you. I always joke, my husband is not in education, and my daughter goes to a school district with standards-based report cards, and she was in kindergarten last year, and he looked at the report card and goes, I don't know what this means. So our goal is to really help you understand what's going on in the classroom, and really, once again, back to our strategic plan, schools can't do it alone. That this is a true partnership between home and community and understanding how we report things out. We also have goals this year to do something with parents about literacy and math. Because once again, math is very different than it was when we were children, and all the different strategies and what does this look like. And so, it's different. School has sort of been transformed over the past 20 years or so. A lot of new initiatives with our reading, especially in K-1, which will roll up to second and third grade next year. We're really excited to share that information with you all. So more communication will be forthcoming about events like that. And I just want to take a moment before we go to questions to thank this team again, because of all the work that they do. A lot of this stuff behind the scenes is because of the efforts they put in, and then working with teachers to build that consistency, to build that really strong programming that helps us all be successful. So in Q&A, yes, is this how the report will look? Yes, on PowerSchool, a PDF will be sent to you via email, like an email alert, that will have the same boxes that you will have. It won't be a Google Doc. It will be a PDF that will be filled. It will have your teacher's name. It will have your child's name. It will have attendance, tardies, teacher comments, everything will be in there. One of the pieces of feedback we've heard in the past from staff and from families is that if a child has more than one teacher, maybe they have an ESL teacher, maybe they have a special education teacher, or an AIS teacher, or there's 2 co-teachers, those were not listed on the report card. Only one teacher's name was. So that's one of the changes of input fields that we've added to this report card. It is lengthy, as you saw us kind of scrolling through, but that is standards-based. I believe we're going to split the page in PowerSchool so that there's columns on either side to make it a little bit cleaner and a little less overwhelming for parents. So basically all the content in the boxes will be the same. It might just be oriented a little bit differently on PowerSchool. Okay. Assessment points are mentioned in the report card. They are not mentioned in the report card, just the score of the standard is mentioned in the report card, but that's nice feedback. We can always, and like when we send out the report cards, this is what we utilize to make these decisions about where kids are, because it's data, right? You want to know how the data was leveraged. Sarah, I don't know if there was anything else you wanted to add about that one.
I will say the DRA is at the top, so that one assessment point you do have this score for. If you ever need to know more about how your child is scoring on something like a Linkit or an iReady, you can certainly reach out to their classroom teacher, but those scores don't go on there. Those scores help inform how your child is progressing towards mastery, though, and weighs in on the scores your child is assigned on their report card.
Mm-hmm. And then Sarah, would you mind putting in the chat the Scholastic Wizard that you mentioned, that link?
You did. So if we go over to answered questions,
Okay.
I have a hyperlink to that Scholastic Book Wizard on the answered questions.
I don't know if everybody
We're not
can
able to see it.
Yeah, so perhaps if you want to email Sarah Moore, Moore, at PrincetonK12.org, we can get that to you, or you can Google Scholastic Wizard. I'm sure that'd be probably a faster way of going about it. To get to that, how do I determine what's the right level or which book has the right level? I use it all the time as well, just to get a gist of, am I in the right range for what my daughter is where she's at reading level wise. And just so you guys know too, we don't want to cause frustration with kids, but you know, a level is just one way to kind of teach reading, right? We want to expose kids to rich text. So maybe you read a page and they read a page, right? If it's a little bit of a higher level for them. We teach kids just write books. Like if you're getting across your hand, you know, you're already at like 4 words that you don't know on a page. Maybe this isn't a just right book for you, but we really try to teach those skills to our students. But that doesn't mean we want to exclude them from rich vocabulary or higher level tools. So picture books tend to be higher level reading levels. Like they tend to be at like a 3rd, 4th, 5th grade reading level sometimes, but that doesn't mean our kids can't comprehend and understand when we read with them, right? And we talk it through. So I encourage that, you know, decodables, levels, non-levels, just read to kids and have them read. That's really the goal here. And I'm sure Sarah, who's our resident literacy expert with, you know, Mary Ellen and Lauren as well, will say the same thing.
100%.
And then someone in the questions asked about the dates again. So here are the dates. And your principals are also a really great resource. They'll send out in their newsletters that, you know, report cards are forthcoming. This was also in the letter that we sent about the night. So all those dates are captured there. So the first report card will not be until right before winter break. And then I believe the next one is right the week before spring break, if I'm recollecting correctly. And then finally that last week of school. So we have 3 60-day trimesters. Okay, I'll keep that up for a minute in case anyone else needs to see it. Okay. If you have any other questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A box. This will be posted on the website tomorrow with the slide deck for you guys to peruse at your leisure. Lauren, Mary Ellen, Dan, Sarah, any other thoughts before we wrap up?
I was just going to say that my email tag is my name on the Zoom. So it's just Sarah Moore at PrincetonK12.org. If you need anything after viewing this or you have additional questions, please reach out and send me an email. I'm always happy to talk through any of these changes so that you feel comfortable.
Thank you, everyone. We really appreciate your time and partnership. We wish you a good night and be on the lookout for more information posted on the website. Take care, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.